Welcome back. Let's reading a bit. I feel a little tired today. I was to read about fighter jets long time ago. I got to this F-18 and I made some video about it in my language, Danish. But let's just read it, because that's 2 months ago.
Boeing F//18E/F Super Hornet. Super Hornet redirects here. For the ultralight aircraft, see US Light Aircraft Hornet. F//18E Super Hornet redirects here. For the video game, see F//18E Super Hornet, video game. The Boeing F//18E and F//18F Super Hornet are a series of American supersonic twin-engine, carrier-capable, multi-role fighter aircraft derived from the McDonnell Douglas F//18 Hornet. The Super Hornet is in service with the armed forces of the United States, Australia, and Kuwait. The F//18E single-seat and F-tandem seat variants are larger and more advanced versions of the F//18C and D Hornet, respectively. A strike fighter capable of air-to-air and air-to-ground forward/surface missions. The Super Hornet has an internal 20mm M61A2 rotary cannon and can carry air-to-air missiles, air-to-surface missiles, and a variety of other weapons. Additional fuel can be carried in up to 5 external fuel tanks, and the aircraft can be configured as an airborne tanker by adding an external air-to-air refueling system. Designed and initially produced by McDonnell Douglas, the Super Hornet first flew in 1995. Low-rate production began in early 1997, reaching full-rate production in September 1997, after the merger of McDonnell Douglas and Boeing the previous month. An electronic warfare variant, the F-A-18G Growler, was also developed. Although officially named Super Hornet, it is commonly referred to as Rhino within the U.S. Navy. The Super Hornet entered operational service with the United States Navy in 2001, supplanting the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, which was retired in 2006. The Super Hornet has served alongside the original Hornet as well. The F//18E/F has been used extensively in combat operations in the Middle East, including the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and against the Islamic State and Assad-aligned forces in Syria. The Royal Australian Air Force, RAF, which operated the F//18 as its main fighter since 1984, ordered the F//18F in 2007 to replace its aging General Dynamics F-111C fleet, with the RAF Super Hornets entering service in December 2010. Development, edit. Origins, edit. Main articles: Northrop YF-17 and McDonnell Douglas F//18 Hornet. The Super Hornet is an enlarged redesign of the McDonnell Douglas F//18 Hornet. The wing and tail configuration trace its origin to a Northrop prototype aircraft, the P530, C-1965, which began as a rework of the lightweight Northrop F-5E, with a larger wing, twin tail fins and a distinctive leading-edge root extension, or lugs. Later flying as the Northrop YF-17 Cobra, it competed in the United States Air Force's Lightweight Fighter, LWF, program to produce a smaller and simpler fighter to complement the larger McDonnell Douglas F-15 Eagle. The YF-17 lost the competition to the YF-16. The Navy directed that the YF-17 be redesigned into the larger F-A-18 Hornet to meet a requirement for a multi-role fighter, FAX, to complement the larger and more expensive Grumman F-14 Tomcat serving in fleet defense interceptor and air superiority roles. Northrop teamed with McDonnell Douglas to navalize the design, with the latter eventually becoming the prime contractor. The Hornet proved to be effective but limited in combat radius. The concept of an enlarged Hornet was first proposed in the 1980s, which was marketed by McDonnell Douglas as Hornet 2000. The Hornet 2000 concept was an advanced F-A-18 with a larger wing and a longer fuselage to carry more fuel and more powerful engines. The end of the Cold War led to a period of military budget cuts and considerable restructuring. At the same time, U.S. naval aviation faced a number of problems. The McDonnell Douglas A-12 Avenger II Advanced Tactical Aircraft, ATA, was cancelled in 1991 after the program ran into serious problems. It was intended to replace the obsolete Grumman A-6 Intruder. The Navy then embarked on another attack aircraft program called the Advanced Attack, AX, but also considered updating an existing design for an interim capability until AX could be fielded. Meanwhile, McDonnell Douglas had proposed the Super Hornet, initially Hornet 2 and later Hornet 2000 in the 1980s, which could serve as an alternate replacement for the A6 Intruder or an interim aircraft for AX. The design would also address some of the limitations of the previous F-A-18 models, such as insufficient bring-back capability, or the ability to recover unused weapons aboard aircraft carriers. The next-generation Hornet design proved more attractive than Grumman's quick-strike upgrade to the F-14 Tomcat, which was regarded as an insufficient technological leap over existing F-14s and was opposed by the Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney. Furthermore, the AX, which had evolved into the A/FX, Advanced Attack Fighter, due to added fighter capabilities, was cancelled in the 1993 bottom-up review as the Super Hornet was viewed as a more attractive low-risk approach to a clean-sheet design due to post-Cold War budget reductions. At the time, the Grumman F-14 Tomcat was the Navy's primary air superiority fighter and fleet defense interceptor. Cheney described the F-14 as 1960s technology, and drastically cut back F-14D procurement in 1989 before cancelling production altogether in 1991, in favor of the updated F-A-18E/F. The decision to replace the Tomcat with an all-Hornet carrier air wing was controversial. Vietnam War ace and Congressman Duke Cunningham criticized the Super Hornet as an unproven design that compromised air superiority. Between 1991 and 1992, the Navy gradually cancelled the Navy Advanced Tactical Fighter, NATF, which would have been a navalized variant of the Air Force's Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor to complement the A-12, due to escalating costs. As a cheaper alternative to NATF, Grumman proposed substantial improvements to the F-14 beyond quick strike, but Congress rejected them as too costly and reaffirmed its commitment to the less expensive F-A-18E/F, originally viewed as an interim for AX or a /FX. The Super Hornet would become the mainstay of the carrier air wing. Testing and production, edit. The Super Hornet was first ordered by the U.S. Navy in 1992, and the total engineering and manufacturing development, EMD, cost was capped at $4.88 billion in FY $1,990, $10.1 billion in 2023. The Navy retained the F-A-18 designation to help sell the program to Congress as a low-risk derivative, though the Super Hornet is largely a new aircraft. To some extent, The design of the F-A-18E/F was driven by a more cautious development approach favoring incremental improvements over the F-A-18C/D, affordability and reliability at the expense of raw performance. The Hornet and Super Hornet share many characteristics, including avionics, ejection seats, radar, armament, mission computer software, and maintenance /operating procedures. The Super Hornet's F414 engines were derived from the Hornet's F404 while also incorporating advances developed for the A12's F412. The initial F-A-18E/F retained most of the avionics systems from the F-A-18C/DS configuration at the time to reduce upfront development costs. The design would be expanded in the Super Hornet with an empty weight slightly greater than the F-15C. The division of manufacturing would largely mirror the Hornets, with McDonnell Douglas, later Boeing, responsible for the forward fuselage, wings, and stabilators while Northrop Grumman produced the center forward/aft fuselage and vertical tails. The design service life was 6,000 flight hours. The Super Hornet first flew on the 29th of November, 1995. Initial production on the F-A-18E/F began in 1995. Flight testing started in 1996 with the F-A-18E/F's first carrier landing in 1997. Low-rate production began in March 1997 with full production beginning in September 1997. Testing continued through 1999, finishing with sea trials and aerial refueling demonstrations, as well as design modifications to resolve wing drop and possible stores release interference. Testing involved 3,100 test flights covering 4,600 flight hours. The Super Hornet underwent U.S. Navy operational tests and evaluations in 1999, and was approved in February 2000. Following the retirement of the F-14 in 2006, all of the Navy's combat jets were Hornet variants until the F-35C Lightning II entered service. The F-A-18E single-seat and F-A-18F two-seat aircraft took the place of the F-14 Tomcat, a 6 Intruder, Lockheed S-3 Viking, and Ka-6D aircraft. An electronic warfare variant, the EA-18G Growler, replaced the EA-6B Prowler. The Navy calls this reduction in aircraft types a neck down. During the Vietnam War era, the Super Hornet's roles were performed by a combination of the A-1/4/A-7, light attack, A-6, medium attack, F-8/F-4, fighter, RA-5C, recon, Ka-3/Ka-6, tanker, and EA-6, electronic warfare. It was anticipated that $1 billion in fleet-wide annual savings would result from replacing other types with the Super Hornet. The Navy considers the Super Hornet's acquisition a success, meeting cost, schedule, and weight, 400 pound, 181 kilograms, below requirement threshold limits. The total Super Hornet procurement number would fluctuate considerably throughout its production run. The 1997 Department of Defense, DoD, Quadrennial Defense Review cut the originally planned number of around 1,000 by nearly half. By October 2008, Boeing had delivered 367 Super Hornets to the U.S. Navy, but the service was still experiencing a strike fighter shortfall as older aircraft types retired and the procurement rate was not sufficient to replenish the carrier air wings, especially with ongoing combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan as well as substantial delays with the F-35 program. In 2006, the Navy was 60 fighters below its validated requirement. The FY 2010 budget bill authorized a multi-year purchase agreement for additional Super Hornets, finalized on the 28th of September, 2010, that reportedly saved $600 million over individual yearly contracts. This contract for 66 Super Hornets and 58 Growlers was intended to mitigate a 4-year delay in the F-35 program. In 2019, Boeing received a $4 billion contract to deliver 78 Block 3 Super Hornets for the Navy through fiscal 2021. The Navy plans to sign year-to-year contracts to convert all of its Block 2 aircraft to Block 3 variants through 2033. As the F-35 began entering service, Boeing announced plans to end Super Hornet production in 2025, later extended to 2027 with an additional 17 orders from the U.S. Navy. Improvements and changes, edit. The Block 2 Super Hornet incorporates an improved active electronically scanned array, AESA, radar, larger displays, the joint helmet-mounted cueing system, and several other avionics replacements. Avionics and weapons systems that were under development for the prospective production version of the Boeing X-32 were used on the Block 2 Super Hornet. New build aircraft received the APG-79 AESA radar beginning in 2005. In January 2008, it was announced that 135 earlier production aircraft were to be retrofitted with AESA radars. In 2008, Boeing discussed the development of a Super Hornet Block 3 with the US and Australian military, featuring additional stealth capabilities and extended range. The airframe is strengthened to increase service life to 10,000 flight hours, and some Block 2 aircraft can be modified to achieve this as well. In 2010, Boeing offered prospective Super Hornet customers the International Roadmap, which included conformal fuel tanks, enhanced engines, an enclosed weapons pod, EWP, a next-generation cockpit, a new missile warning system, and an internal infrared search and track, IRST, system. The IRST was later mounted on the centerline external tank. The EWP has 4 internal stations for munitions. A single aircraft can carry a total of 3 EWPs, housing up to 12 AMRAAMs and 2 sidewinders. The next generation cockpit features a 19x11-inch touch-sensitive display. In 2011, Boeing received a U.S. Navy contract to develop a new mission computer. In 2007, Boeing stated that a passive infrared search and track, IRST, sensor would be an available future option. The sensor, mounted in a modified centerline fuel tank, detects long-wave IR emissions to spot and track targets such as aircraft. Combat using the IRST and AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles is immune to radar jamming. In May 2009, Lockheed Martin announced its selection by Boeing for the IRST's technology development phase, and a contract followed in November 2011. As of September 2013, a basic IRST would be fielded in 2016 and a longer-range Block 2 version in 2019. The sensor would be designated the AN/ASG34V, IRST-21. An F/A-18F performed a flight equipped with the IRST system in February 2014, and Milestone C approval authorizing low-rate initial production, LRIP, was granted in December 2014. The sequestration cuts in 2013 would cause years of delay, and the Navy chose to skip the basic version and transition directly to the Block 2 IRST for operational service. After initial production quality issues, The IRST became operational in January 2025. Advanced Super Hornet, edit. Boeing and Northrop Grumman self-funded a prototype of the Advanced Super Hornet. The prototype features a 50% reduction in frontal radar cross-section, RCS, conformal fuel tanks, CFT, and an enclosed weapons pod. Features could also be integrated onto the EA-18G Growler. Using CFTs on the EA-18G fleet was speculated as useful for relieving underwing space and lowering the drag margin for the next generation jammer. Flight tests of the Advanced Super Hornet began on the 5th of August, 2013 and continued for 3 weeks, testing the performance of CFTs, the Enclosed Weapons Pod, EWP, and signature enhancements. The U.S. Navy was reportedly pleased with the Advanced Super Hornet's flight test results, and hopes it will provide future procurement options. Although the Advanced Super Hornet was not pursued, many elements would be transferred to the Block 3. In 2013, the U.S. Navy was considering the widespread adoption of CFTs, which would allow the Super Hornet to carry 3,500 pound, 1,600 kilograms, of additional fuel. Budgetary pressures from the F-35C Lightning II and Pacific Region operations were cited as reasons supporting the use of CFTs. Flight testing demonstrated CFTs could slightly reduce drag while expanding the combat range by 260 nautical miles, 300 mi, 480 kilometers. The prototype CFT weighed 1,500 pound, 680 kilograms, while production CFTs are expected to weigh 870 pound, 390 kilograms. Boeing stated that the CFTs do not add any cruise drag but acknowledged a negative impact imposed on transonic acceleration due to increased wave drag. General Electric's Enhanced Performance Engine, EPE, increasing the F414GE400's power output by 20%, was suggested as a mitigating measure. In 2021, the U.S. Navy halted plans to fit CFTs as standard on all Block 3 Super Hornets due to cost, schedule, and performance issues. In 2009, development commenced on several engine improvements, including greater resistance to foreign object damage, reduced fuel burn rate, and potentially increased thrust of up to 20%. In 2014, Boeing revealed a Super Hornet hybrid concept, equipped with the EA-18G Growler's electronic signal detection capabilities to allow for target's engagement using the receiver. The concept did not include the ALQ-99 jamming pod. Growth capabilities could include the addition of a long-range infrared search and track sensor and new air-to-air tracking modes. Design, edit. Overview, edit. The Super Hornet is largely a new aircraft at about 20% larger, 7,000 pound, 3,200 kilograms. Heavier empty weight, and 15,000 pound, 6,800 kilograms, heavier maximum weight than the original Hornet. The Super Hornet carries 33% more internal fuel, increasing mission range by 41% and endurance by 50% over the legacy Hornet. The empty weight of the Super Hornet is about 11,000 pound, 5,000 kilograms. Less than that of the F-14 Tomcat which it replaced, while approaching, but not matching, the F-14's payload and range. Although lacking some of the F-14's raw performance, the F-A-18E/F has much better handling characteristics and controllability and was also significantly more reliable and affordable to operate. With the Super Hornet being significantly heavier than the legacy Hornet, the catapult and arresting systems must be set differently. To aid safe flight operations and prevent confusion in radio calls, the Super Hornet is informally referred to as the Rhino to distinguish it from earlier Hornets, partly because of the N/APX111 pizza box IFF antenna protruding on top of the nose. The Rhino nickname was previously applied to the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II, which was retired from U.S. Navy combat use in 1987. The Super Hornet, unlike the previous Hornet, can be equipped with an aerial refueling system, ARS, or buddy store for the refueling of other aircraft, filling the tactical airborne tanker role the Navy had lost with the retirement of the KA-6D and Lockheed S-3B Viking tankers. The ARS includes an external 330 US gal, 1200 L, tank with hose reel on the centerline, along with 4 external 480 US gal, 1800 L, tanks and internal tanks, for a total of 29,000 pound, 13,000 kilograms, of fuel on the aircraft. On typical missions, a fifth of the air wing is dedicated to the tanker role, which consumes aircraft fatigue life expectancy faster than other missions. It most commonly uses JP5 jet fuel. Airframe changes, edit. The forward fuselage is unchanged, but the remainder of the aircraft shares little with earlier F-A-18C/D models. The fuselage was stretched by 34 in, 86 centimeters, to make room for fuel and future avionics upgrades and increased the wing area by 25%, yet the Super Hornet has 42% fewer structural parts than the original Hornet. The wings have a dogtooth extension and a strip of porous surface at the folding joint to mitigate wing drop. The General Electric F414 engine, developed from the Hornet's F404, has 35% additional thrust over most of the flight envelope and is rated at 22,000 lbf, 98 kN, in afterburner. The Super Hornet can return to an aircraft carrier with a larger load of unspent fuel and munitions than the Hornet. This ability is known as bring back, which for the Super Hornet is in excess of 9,000 pound, 4,100 kilograms. Other differences include larger rectangular carrot inlets with fixed ramps for the more powerful engines and 2 extra wing hardpoints for payload, for a total of 11, retaining previous hardpoints on the bottom centerline, wingtips, and 2 conformal fuselage positions. Among the most significant aerodynamic changes are the enlarged leading edge extensions, legs, that provide improved vortex lifting characteristics in high angle of attack maneuvers, and reduce the static stability margin to enhance pitching characteristics. This modification results in pitch rates in excess of 40 degrees per second, and high resistance to departure from controlled flight. Due to concerns over released stores potentially striking the airframe from early wind tunnel testing, all underwing pylons are canted outwards slightly, although this was later determined to be unnecessary. Production tooling had already been adjusted so the canted pylons remained to save development costs and avoid revalidating all flight testing. While the effects are marginal for cruise drag, they are more substantial for transonic and supersonic drag. Radar signature reduction measures, edit. Further information, radar cross-section. Survivability is a key feature of the Super Hornet. The U.S. Navy took a balanced approach to survivability in its design. It does not rely primarily on low observability technology, but rather adopts improvements to its radar signature alongside other innovations, incorporating more advanced electronic warfare capabilities, reduced ballistic vulnerability, and greater employment of standoff weapons to collectively enhance crew and aircraft safety. While the F-A-18E/F is not a stealth fighter like the F-22, it does have a frontal radar cross-section, RCS, an order of magnitude smaller than prior generation fighters. Additional changes for reducing RCS can be installed on an as-needed basis. The F/A-18E/FS RCS is reduced greatly from some aspects, mainly the front and rear. The design of the carrot engine inlets reduces the aircraft's frontal radar cross-section, with the alignment of the leading edges of the inlets designed to scatter radiation to the sides. Fixed fan-like reflecting structures in the inlet tunnel divert radar energy away from the rotating fan blades. The Super Hornet also makes considerable use